Japanese car giant Nissan confirms continued production in Sunderland, securing 7,000 jobs. That as the service sector helped the UK economy grow faster than expected in the last 3 months. Post-Brexit questions persist, but the Prime Minister is confident.
This is a very important commitment of investment here in the UK. I think it shows the strength of our economy. We've been showing Nissan and others that we are committed to getting the best possible deal.
Also this lunchtime, teenager Damon Smith appears in court, charged with prompting a security alert after an explosive device was found on the London Underground. Concerns grow for the refugee children in Calais. The jungle's gone, leaving many of them lost and vulnerable. And from the heart, the service personnel and their memories shared to help boost the British Legion's Poppy appeal.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. Seen as an acid test of the economic prospects for post-Brexit Britain, the Nissan decision is crucial. Following talks in Downing Street earlier this month, Nissan today confirmed they'll build the new Qashqai car and the X-Trail SUV at their plant in Sunderland. The news came as official figures suggest the UK economy enjoyed better than expected growth in the last 3 months. But with the mighty service sector doing most of the heavy lifting, the Nissan news from the quieter manufacturing sector is significant. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
The prediction that Britain's economy would come to a juddering halt following the referendum has not come to pass. In fact, parts of the economy seem to be doing rather well. Today, Nissan said it would build its new Qashqai model in Sunderland.
This is fantastic news for the British economy from Nissan. This is a very important commitment of investment here in the UK. I think it shows the strength of our economy. We've been showing Nissan and others that we are committed to getting the best possible deal from the future relationship that we will be negotiating with the European Union, and we wish to ensure and assure the competitiveness of the British economy.
Now, what government support Nissan's been offered isn't yet clear, but it is an international vote of confidence.
The UK government has assured us that they will work with all of the automotive industry to make sure that we remain competitive, and we trust the government today as we've trusted them in the past, and they've moved heaven and earth to make sure that they give the assurances to our executive committee. So it's no more complicated than that.
The economy grew by 0.5% in the 3 months following the referendum. That's a touch slower than the 0.7% rate of the previous quarter, but still 2.3% higher than the same quarter last year. The figures were boosted by the transport, storage and communication sector, although tempered by a dip in performance in construction and manufacturing.
The third quarter has shown a resilience in the economy following the referendum decision. That's very good news. It means we go into the next period when we'll be negotiating our exit from the European Union from a position of clear strength, and that strengthens our negotiating hand.
Film production, including the latest Star Wars instalment, has been a significant force in boosting the economy. But of course, there's always a dark side. The weak pound is likely to push prices up.
Sterling's post-referendum slide suggests that inflation should breach the 2% target at next year and rise to and peak at around just over 3% in 2018. So that should squeeze households' real incomes ahead, and that suggests that consumer spending is likely to slow in the quarters ahead.
So although the economic news was good today, especially for the automotive sector, no one can say with any great certainty that there aren't stormy waters ahead.
Well, in a moment, we'll have further analysis from Carl in Westminster. But first, let's get some more on that announcement from Nissan in Sunderland. As you can see there, Greg Easteel is outside the plant for us. Greg, how much does today's decision matter, not just crucially for the Nissan employees, but for everyone in the North East?
Well, Alistair, it's almost hard to overstate the significance of all of this in this part of the world. Nissan, as you say, employs 7,000 people directly and an estimated more than 40,000 people further down the supply chain. In fact, the top man at Nissan Europe stopped production here at around 11 o'clock this morning to make the announcement of today's decision. And in his words, The staff here inside are buzzing today. But you know, there's another important significance to this story. Back on referendum night, Sunderland was one of the first places to declare what was at that stage seen as a shock vote in favour of Brexit. In the days that followed, there were fears that maybe this city had cut its own throat, especially when Nissan hinted that might change any decisions for the negative about further future investment. Well, Brexiteers both here and across the country now will be saying, as far as they're concerned, this demonstrates that the future is bright with Britain out of Europe.
Greg, thank you. And as promised, back to Carl Dinnan in Westminster. Greg was just talking about it. Before the referendum, there were plenty of voices warning us about how bad a vote to leave would be for the economy. Today, major employer confirms it's staying put. GDP figures you were telling us a moment ago aren't that bad. Were all of those warnings wrong?
Certainly looks like it, doesn't it, Alistair? I mean, people will remember George Osborne's shock and severe shock scenarios, saying that in this quarter that we've just seen the decent results for, the economy could shrink by as much as 1%. So that clearly hasn't happened. There are two buts, I think. Those scenarios did assume that Article 50 would have been triggered by that point and that we would already be on the way out. Viewers will be aware that we're not quite on the way out yet, and we don't know what will happen when Article 50 is triggered. The other but is that the pound has been hit by the referendum result. As everyone knows, pound has dropped, although it did bounce back up a bit today. So far, that's been good for exporters, but as you heard in my report there, it will eventually feed through to consumers. Prices will rise, inflation will go up, and that could affect the economy in a negative way. So far, it hasn't been too much bad news as a result of the referendum, but Brexit hasn't really got underway yet, and there is more uncertainty to come.
Carl, thank you. A teenager has appeared in court after an explosive device was found on a tube train in London. 19-year-old Damon Smith entered no plea at Westminster Magistrates, but his mother shouted her concerns from the back of the court. Juliette Bremner was there for us. Juliette, what happened?
Well, the Chief Magistrate here at Westminster Magistrates heard that Damon Smith had been charged with possessing explosives likely to endanger life. The 19-year-old was brought into the court accompanied by two plainclothes officers. As he took his seat, he smiled, he waved and he made a thumbs-up gesture at his mother before confirming that he lived in South London. His mother, who's seen here arriving at court on the left of the picture, took her seat in the public gallery but did become somewhat distressed throughout proceedings. She stood up at one stage and she called out, "My son doesn't understand, I'm sorry, but he's got Asperger's," before being persuaded to sit down again. The court was told that this device was found by two passengers on a tube train in North Greenwich near the O2 Centre. They gave it to the driver, but he didn't know what was in it until he opened it and had a look. The court was told by the prosecutor today that, in fact, it was a viable device and that bomb disposal officers had had to cut a wire to make it safe. It contained, she said, ball bearings and explosives. Smith was arrested outside the university he attends the day after. The court was told that he did have autism and that he thought this was a prank. But he was refused bail and he will next appear at the Old Bailey next month.
Juliette, thank you. Aid workers in Calais say young refugee children were forced to sleep on the streets last night after the jungle camp was demolished. The French authorities insist they were offered refuge, but charities say many didn't know about it and have now run off out of the reach of further help. Sharon Thomas reports.
The remnants of a night with no shelter. Up to 100 people slept rough here overnight, dozens of them children. With the so-called jungle camp closing down, the French authorities say they contacted a number of charities late last night, telling them to bring any unaccompanied minors to the processing warehouse to sleep. We passed on a message to associations and told them that should they find migrants, especially minors, we are still here. We stand ready to process them. The charities say this message wasn't clearly communicated. Save the Children say its staff had barely half an hour to act, and by then the warehouse had closed its doors for the night.
I know that lots of children were sleeping under the bridge, some outside the warehouse. Where they've gone now, we can't be sure. Lots of children have fled. They've gone elsewhere. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen. We didn't want children losing faith in this system and running out, because we're not going to be able to protect them.
The dismantling of the camp is now in its 4th day. The operation has been a turbulent one, with some residents setting fire to their temporary homes. Violence has fled. Riot police moved in. More than 5,500 migrants have now been moved to various reception centres across France to apply for asylum. This includes 1,500 unaccompanied minors. French police say they're still finding migrants in shelters who don't want to leave. The authorities say the site will be completely cleared by Monday. Sharon Thomas, ITV News.
Bad weather is hindering rescue efforts in central Italy, where 2 strong earthquakes last night hit the same region as August's deadly quake. There's been no reports of casualties from yesterday's 5.5 and 6.1 magnitude tremors near Viso in the Macerata province, but dozens of residents have been left injured and buildings damaged. Viso is 45 miles from Amatrice, which was badly damaged in August's earthquakes. Here, the General Medical Council has warned that a state of unease within the medical profession risks affecting patients as well as doctors. The annual report from the General Medical Council highlights poor morale amongst staff after a turbulent year for the profession.
Save our NHS! Save our NHS!
Junior doctors particularly are feeling the pressure. The new contract has prompted industrial action on several occasions over the last 12 months. That frustration has taken its toll on patients too, with tens of thousands of operations delayed as a result. But today, a warning of poor morale generally among doctors is highlighted in the General Medical Council's annual report, saying a state of unease risks affecting patients. The Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, remains adamant the new contracts will produce a better health service, disputing the protests at his door. Today, his department says it's listening to the concerns of staff as it attempts to improve services. But with 86.5% of doctors wanting to take a career break, nearly half of them citing burnout, those concerns are severe and growing. And I'm joined live now by Andrew McCracken from National Voices, a charity set up to speak on behalf of the patients. What are they saying to you?
There's a lot of concern out there. We're now hearing from a number of different bodies that the NHS is in serious crisis, and to hear it today from the General Medical Council, normally quite a reserved body, to hear them making the strong statements they are today is a worry for the profession of doctors, but a worry for patients as well, and should be an alarm bell to government.
That is an important distinction, is it? Because the GMC is the regulating body for the medical profession. The BMA, as it were, is the union.
Yes, exactly.
This is coming from the men and women who are in charge of making sure we have a safe NHS.
The GMC's role is to protect patients by making sure that medical professionals can do their job properly. And there's strong evidence that when medical professionals and other professionals in health and care have low morale, that has a direct negative impact on the care that patients receive. It's extremely worrying.
This may sound like a daft question, and it's not meant to be, but is there anything that patients can do to, clearly they're only there because they're ill, but to ease the burden? You know, people not turning up for appointments and stuff like that. I mean, it's a two-way street.
I think it's actually a really good point. The system we currently have is quite a paternalistic system. It doesn't give patients the power to look after themselves. How many people have sight of their own medical record, for instance? How many people are taught about the consequences of their long-term condition and how they should manage it themselves? That's the sort of new way of thinking that we need if we're to reduce the burden on our NHS and then therefore reduce the pressures on these doctors and therefore better quality of care for the people who do have to go into hospital.
Sure. And final thought for folk listening to the conversation at home. Have you ever heard of a scenario where so many are talking about career breaks, 87%, half of them because they simply feel burnt out?
I think it is a very worrying time. And I think in the build-up to the autumn statement, the government needs to be thinking long and hard about putting more money into the NHS, but also, crucially, more money into social care as well.
All right. Andrew McCracken, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew McCracken there from the National Voices charity. Still to come, a fresh appeal why this year's poppies come with a new message to rethink remembrance. The But first, a new warning that the world is facing its biggest mass extinction of animals since the demise of the dinosaur. The Living Planet report is predicting that by 2020, global wildlife populations will have fallen by 2/3 since 1970. Faring the worst is freshwater populations like frogs and reptiles. They've declined by 81% from 1970 to 2012. Hunting, deforestation, overfishing, pollution and climate change are behind the decline. Our correspondent Ben Chapman is at Chester Zoo. How worried are the staff there about this general drift, Ben?
Well, they are naturally deeply concerned about the figures, but they've told me today they are not hugely surprised. Now, we were hoping to show you some black rhinos who can illustrate this problem. They have made a temporary disappearance. Hopefully they'll make a re-emergence in a moment. But their population in the wild has declined from 65,000 in 1970 to just 5,000 today. And they're on a critically endangered list that includes elephants, tigers, gorillas, hundreds of species of frog that have been identified in today's report as being in danger of dying out completely. And I'm joined by Mike Jordan from Chester Zoo.
Hello.
The report authors talk about a possible mass extinction on the scale of the dinosaurs. Is that overblown or is that realistic?
I don't think it is overblown. In fact, we're already seeing extinctions that are equaling the rate. I think we forget that happened over thousands of years, and we're looking at things that are going on over just a few years. So we're already in a rate that's similar to the dinosaurs and getting worse.
And what are the reasons for this? Why is it happening in such huge numbers?
Well, fundamentally, in the same time that those populations have halved, the human population has doubled, and all those pressures it brings of exploitation, habitat loss, particularly extraction of water, all of those aspects, and of course climate change, are massively affecting species.
And in the case of the rhinos, who I'm pleased to say have come back, it's to do with poaching, isn't it? But the key theme here is it's man-made, this problem.
It is. It's our problem and it's ours to correct. And yes, you're right. I mean, in the case of rhinos, more than 3 rhinos every day are poached for their horn. And that's just an unsustainable figure, and much of what we're doing to this planet is just unsustainable.
Are there particular populations of animal who are badly affected that you're especially worried about?
Well, here at Chester Zoo, of course, we focus on a lot of the really critically endangered species, and so a lot of species are faring much worse than the figures in this report. But yes, those that are heavily exploited, but also those that seem to be associated with fresh water really are doing poorly, and that's just the impact we're having on rivers and pollution and abstraction, as well as the big species that we're exploiting.
And as briefly as you can, what can we do about it?
Well, it's our problem to solve, and it's really a case of being as sustainable as we can, and we have to treat the planet and the species that share it with us with respect.
OK, Mike, thank you very much indeed. There is another startling statistic today which really connects this problem to the human population of the world. In the same period that this report has been studying, 1970 to the present day, the human population has doubled from 3.5 billion to 7 billion. It won't be an easy problem to solve, but it is one scientists say that needs now very urgent attention.
Indeed. Ben and Mike, thank you both very much indeed, and the magnificent rhino in the background. Government's considering changing laws involving rape cases following the trial of the footballer Ched Evans. The Chesterfield striker was cleared of rape at Cardiff Crown Court after a retrial earlier this month, but the decision to allow the jury to hear details about the complainant's sexual history has been questioned. And the FA has launched an investigation after violence broke out between West Ham and Chelsea last night. 7 people were arrested after coins, seats and bottles were thrown toward the end of the game at London Stadium. And England's won the right to host the 2021 Rugby League World Cup, beating off competition from the United States and Canada. England last hosted the World Cup in 2013, where Australia beat New Zealand in front of record-breaking crowds. Usual showbiz razzmatazz was deliberately missing from the start of this year's Poppy Appeal today. Instead, it was about telling the stories of a younger generation of veterans, the men and women who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's part of a new campaign to urge the nation to rethink remembrance. Our reporter Olivia Kinsley went to meet one of those brave soldiers.
In his late teens, Pete Dunning was working in a pub in Liverpool and playing semi-professional rugby. He joined the Royal Marines when he was 20 years old. Within 6 months, he was serving in Afghanistan.
We were in a lot of firefights with the Taliban. And yeah, I did lose a couple of friends, and some friends did drive over some IEDs as well. So which was horrible to see.
In 2008, it happened to him.
My driver, he passed away unfortunately instantly, and there's another chap in the vehicle who got badly injured and badly burnt. I lost my legs, I fractured my spine, punctured my lungs, and I've got burns to all 4 limbs as well. It was just the hardest time of my life and the darkest time of my life, to be honest. There were days where I just told the nurses just to shut the curtains because I didn't want to see anyone or do anything, really.
Jeffrey Pattinson understands the despair Pete felt far better than most. He was shot in both legs during the Second World War and was so traumatised he wouldn't talk about the conflict for 50 years.
When the metal detector sounds, your stomach knots.
Jeffrey features in this year's Poppy Appeal campaign, which asks us to remember that those who've served in recent conflicts are also veterans who may need support.
The more modern day injuries now really unfortunately, the hidden injuries. Virtually more people have died through suicide than have actually died in Afghanistan now. We are veterans, we have been to war, we have seen horrendous sights, myself included.
They were both soldiers decades apart. Today, they are both veterans. Olivia Kinsley, ITV News.
And the poppies go on sale nationally this weekend when I and many others will be wearing them. Finally, 4 senior members of the royal family made a rare joint appearance in Dorset today. The Queen, Prince Philip, Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall all made an appearance in Poundbury on the outskirts of Dorchester on land belonging to the Duchy of Cornwall. The Queen and Prince Charles unveiled a statue in honour of the Queen Mother. And that is it this lunchtime. I'll be back with Charlene White with the ITV Evening News at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us, bye-bye and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.